A former NFL defensive lineman did not hold back on Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens with some pretty wild comments. We talk about that and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome in to the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcast network. Appreciate everybody for being here, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day. And thank you out there to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. If you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well for all of your support. We're a 5-day-a-week plus more daily Ravens podcast, bringing you that daily Ravens coverage Monday through Friday, plus so much more. We have some bonus stuff on the weekends as well, and a whole lot of Ravens content for you here on Locked On Ravens. We have a jam-packed episode today as a former NFL defensive lineman made some wild Lamar Jackson comments. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about Josh Allen and the Bills helping out the Ravens in the current state of the AFC North. And finally, we'll get into some news and some notes. We got some quotes from players and coaches, some injury news. So we'll dive into a lot here today on Locked On Ravens. And I want to tell everyone today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Down the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. All right. Well, we know what happened on Thanksgiving. The Ravens ruined it, and it was unfortunate, and they lost 32-14, and it was bad. But I am feeling, and we're going to get to this in the second part of the show, a little bit better after how we saw the Pittsburgh Steelers perform. But doesn't take away the fact that the Baltimore offense is in shambles right now and the defense couldn't hold on. And over the course of the contest, a lot of this stuff I just saw and I wanted to talk about it. A former NFL defensive lineman in Braden Fehoko, who played for a couple of years in the NFL. He played for the Chargers and, was a part of their team from 2020 through 2022. And then, he ended up going and signed with the Steelers and then was waived and re-signed to the practice squad and had a couple of, trips to the active roster, back down on the practice squad, etc. He had a lot of comments over the course of the game on Thursday about Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. And I thought they were interesting to say the least. So the one that got the most attention from Fehoko was about Lamar Jackson. And this one was pretty wild. He said, quote, "Ravens will never win a Super Bowl behind Lamar Jackson, man. The individual regular season accolades will never equate to winning football in the playoffs. He's Michael Vick with better PR." Sheesh. I mean, man, that's harsh. That's harsh. And to me, very premature and a little disrespectful, if I'm being honest, too. Like, again, we can all admit here that Lamar Jackson hasn't played great over the last couple of weeks. I think there are a lot of factors in that. We've talked about that for the last couple of weeks here on Locked On Ravens about just what's going on with this offense, what's going on with Lamar. Lamar didn't have a good game on Thursday night. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about that. He was missing throws. There was also poor offensive line play. There was also the fact that, he had essentially 2 touchdowns wiped off the board, one from an OPI and the other from Isaiah Likely fumbling the ball. The injury situation, his health is another factor in this. There are a lot of factors. But saying that Lamar is never going to win a Super Bowl is just, again, it's one of those like narratives that's been out there on him for his entire career. And has he won it yet? No. Has he even made it there yet? No. But there are other all-time great quarterbacks that, Lamar has been compared to in terms of lack of playoff success that, like Peyton Manning, he wasn't very young when he won his first Super Bowl. He was 30 years old. Drew Brees was 31. There are these players that it just takes a little longer for. Not everybody can be, Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady in that regard. Has it been disappointing? Yeah. Has Lamar Jackson been his best in the playoffs? No. But this is what I've been talking about throughout all the bonus episodes we did over the weekend and, during the instant reaction show after the game. And we did the episode on Friday. I said, I feel like a lot of people are going to come out of the woodwork now that Lamar is struggling with a lot of these takes. It's 3 regular season games. And to Fehoko's point here to kind of flip that back on itself. It's like individual regular season success will never equate to winning football in the playoffs, he says. Well, why are we judging Lamar off of why are we doing that in the regular season then? This clearly was about the game. It was happening throughout the game, and I just don't get it. He also talked about, he also was diving into other narratives like, oh, Lamar played with 10 Pro Bowlers last year, not including himself. And again, that's just a tired narrative too, because it discredits what Lamar Jackson did. That's, that's a conversation from last year that we talked about seemingly every day. And he then mentioned Lamar again and said, Lamar, the athlete, has no flaws in his game. Lamar, the quarterback, can get real tricky when the time comes to sit and play QB. I applaud teams like Philly for building a roster around your quarterback and not forcing him to QB 75% of the time. Baltimore needs better roster construction offensively. I don't disagree with the roster construction part. I don't disagree there, especially on the offensive line. But talking about how it can get tricky when it's time to sit and play QB for Lamar. Lamar has one of the highest passer ratings in NFL history. Lamar has put himself on the passer rating leaderboard in single season multiple times. No one, just randomly throws for, 41 touchdowns and 4 interceptions in a season. I don't think that, it gets tricky there with Lamar. He generally is a very low mistake player. Wasn't the case on Thursday night. Wasn't the case. He's had 3 straight games without a touchdown. It has not been a good stretch from Lamar. But judging him in essentially his whole career, both apparently past, present, and future, off of this 3-game stretch that Lamar has had is just, it's wild to me. Like, Lamar could very easily down the stretch here in these last 5 games, go crazy and be back to the Lamar Jackson that we saw earlier in the season. That's the crazy part too. Not 4 months ago, 3 months ago, were we seeing Lamar Jackson before his injury light up the league? And so it's just, again, it's what have you done for me now lately, league? I understand that, but judging a guy and saying he's not going to win a Super Bowl and all that, maybe he won't. I still believe that he will, but saying that when he's 28 years old, going to be 29 next month now because it's December, he still has time. It's not like he's 33 years old or anything like that. There's still a lot of work to be done there, but I mean, again, very premature thing to say in my opinion. And he also said, even Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts is dual threat quarterbacks figured it out in order to win the big games. You can't just freelance at quarterback. You got to stand in the pocket and deliver. Lamar does that. Lamar does that. He's an incredible pocket passer. I mean, this stuff is just wild. I mean, these are narratives that have gone on for years and years and years. It's he can't throw to the outside or, the deep ball accuracy. And he's had to improve. Again, everybody has to improve on things, but it wasn't as bad as everybody was making it out to be. Still areas to improve for sure, but he has improved in almost every single area of his game. We still see improvements. And while it might not feel like it over this last 3-week stretch, I'm not going to judge a guy who's been one of the most generational players I've ever seen at that position, both with his arm and with his legs, off of a bum 3-game stretch where he's clearly not all the way healthy. His offensive line is bad. And yeah, he missed some throws. Cool. We can say that. Lamar is not immune to criticism. No one is. But it's pretty crazy to me that these conversations are still being had about Lamar Jackson, where, yeah, he hasn't won in the playoffs effectively and, to the level that he's needed to probably at this point in his career. 100%. I get that and I understand it. He hasn't been up to a standard there. Neither is the team in a lot of other circumstances too in that postseason. It just feels like, again, when the Ravens fail, it's put a lot on Lamar Jackson, and I think people are starting to wake up, at least nationally, to the coaching thing. Even Fehoko talked about that, where he got on the Ravens for their usage of the running backs, where I mentioned that on yesterday's bonus episode. The snap counts for the Ravens running backs in week 13. Rasheen Ali, 29, Derrick Henry, 24, Keaton Mitchell, 8. That's ridiculous. You cannot have Derrick Henry and Keaton Mitchell combined barely outsnapping Rasheen Ali. Ali being your leading guy in the snap department there. Or Derrick Henry, he had a lot of nice runs, or maybe not a lot, but he had a pretty decent amount of them. And it's like, oh, you see Derrick Henry score the touchdown, and then, he has a couple of big runs. You don't see him for 3 drives. Keaton Mitchell scores a touchdown. Where'd Keaton Mitchell go? I don't know. It's Rasheen Ali out there. I get that they want to have the pass protection back out there. I get it, but you need to play your stars. You need to get Derrick Henry in more situations. And there's nothing that justifies Rasheen Ali playing more snaps than Derrick Henry and Keaton Mitchell. Keaton getting 8 snaps is crazy to me. Like, he goes out there, he rips off big runs, he gives you explosiveness. We know who Derrick Henry is, and I'm not trying to disrespect Rasheen Ali. I think he's a fine player, but you need to utilize your stars better than that. And so Fehoko ended up saying just a lot on that situation. He said Derrick Henry got 0 touches in the second quarter against the Cincinnati defense who can't defend the run, while Cincinnati force-fed Samaje Perine over Chase Brown in the red zone. Said, I've never seen a division filled with coaches who don't want to win the division. So John Harbaugh and Zach Taylor getting the brunt of that one from Fehoko. And then he also talked about, he said, quote, Derrick Henry heating up. John Harbaugh and Todd Monken, get him out of the game. That's seriously what it felt like. It's crazy. That's what it felt like. And even though the Ravens didn't, like, outside of those 2 big runs, run the ball like uber effectively, as a team in that game, they still were running the ball, okay. And even okay doesn't justify you just completely stopping that aspect of your game or not giving, those guys a look, especially when it wasn't like it was a 4-possession game here for the majority of it. They were still within striking distance. So you average 5.6 yards per carry as a team. You need to utilize those guys. Fehoko also said, did Derrick Henry do something to John Harbaugh? 10 carries, 60 yards, 1 touchdown, 6 yards per carry. If you literally hand the ball off to him 30 times a night, you win. Why do coaches make it so hard? And then he also said, Derrick Henry, first quarter, 6 carries, 33 yards, 1 touchdown. Second quarter, 0 snaps. Third quarter, 4 carries, 27 yards, 1 reception, 44 yards. Fourth quarter, 0 snaps. All 5 turnovers. Henry was not on the field. Someone in Baltimore needs to be fired today. Woo. I mean, look, I can't justify it. I cannot justify Derrick Henry not being out there as consistently as he was not on Thursday night. And this has been a recurring issue where he hasn't been on the field in the biggest moments for them a lot of the time. And not all the time, but a lot of it. And I don't understand it. I truly don't. So maybe John Harbaugh will answer that. Maybe he'll get asked about it. If he does, we'll talk about it. But Fehoko truly not holding anything back on Lamar Jackson or the Ravens and their coaching staff. So yeah, it's we're gonna see how this all unfolds, because the offense right now is in a very rough spot. The Ravens were in a rough spot in the AFC North after Thursday night, but it got a little better thanks to Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll talk about that and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Gametime. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Gametime app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Gametime, you can track the price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. You pull up the app and the layout makes it so simple to scroll through matchups and compare seat views. Pick a game, tap a section, and have your tickets locked in within minutes. No confusion, no hunting for fine print. And prices include fees up front, which I love because there are no last-second surprises at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets in every match, concert, or event with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Gametime. Moving along on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Monday edition of the show. It's a new week, Thanksgiving. Hopefully everybody had a happy Thanksgiving, but that game happened. It's over with. And while they certainly need to take lessons away from that and really get serious about what happened in that game, you still do have to move on and prepare for the Pittsburgh Steelers in the AFC North matchup that's about to happen here in Week 14. So appreciate everybody who's here with me again today and who makes Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We have that 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage here on the show. So the regular show is Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time. This is episode 1,651 consecutively for me, dating back to 2019 when I started off. I've never missed an episode of this show. We've added on a bunch too. We now do bonus episodes on the weekends when there are headlines. We have Locked On Ravens watch-alongs during the games. We have instant reactions after the games and after pieces of big news. Locked On Ravens squad show, myself, Sam Njoku, and former Ravens receiver Kadri Ismail. That's twice per week. I mean, we have so much here for you on Locked On Ravens. Now, that game on Thursday night for Baltimore wasn't good, but the Pittsburgh Steelers squandered a massive opportunity, and the Buffalo Bills helped out the Baltimore Ravens because Buffalo and Pittsburgh, they matched up in week number 13. Ravens, you have the whole rooting guide, and you're rooting hard for Josh Allen and those Bills to take down the Steelers, and that is exactly what happened. 26-7, the final score. Pittsburgh got routed in this game. Really, it was 7-3 Pittsburgh at the half, and then Buffalo just destroyed them in the second half. 23 unanswered points for the Bills. So, look, Pittsburgh right now is a really interesting team, and I usually don't pull up stats before the end of Tuesday or I guess on Tuesday, because that's when everything is updated. But just to provide context, and this is all happening, but this is all before week 13 happened. But Pittsburgh's defense is middling. It's a middling unit right now. And it's a long way away from what they have been over the course of, you can go back as far as you want to. They still have the names on that defense, but shout out to the Bills, first of all. So I think we can all say here, Josh Allen, thank you, Bills, for helping out the Ravens. The Ravens now back on top in the AFC North. So even though the Ravens didn't play, they still ended up winning here despite losing on Thursday night. But man, the AFC North right now, I'm a little embarrassed, if I'm being honest, about the AFC North. It's a division with so much pride and so much history with all the teams and whatnot. And, I know some of the rivalries, especially with Baltimore, don't go as far back because, Baltimore came in the league in 96, but, and I know the AFC Central and all that, right? But even still, you have historic rivalries between the Ravens and the Steelers. And I know the Ravens and Bengals has picked up some juice over the, really since Joe and Lamar came in the league. It is what it is there. It's just bad this year. It's probably the worst division of football, not named the NFC South, in my opinion. And even the NFC South has Carolina and all that. So, actually, let me pull up the standings and see if there is a worse division right now. Not the AFC East. Not the AFC South is balling this year. The AFC West is balling this year. Well, actually, the NFC East is, they're still better than the AFC North, but the NFC East is kind of underwhelming. Yeah, NFC North is good. Yeah, NFC South is doing better than the AFC North is. And then, the NFC West is wild. So, AFC North is probably the worst division in football this season. By record it is, because there's no team. The AFC North is the only team, or the only division, with a team that does not have 7 wins. Every other division has at least one team with 7 wins. The AFC North has 0. Not great. But right now, that's what gives me the most confidence in this Ravens team, if I'm being honest. What gives me the most confidence in this Ravens team is how weak their division is, because I've said it over and over again. In my opinion, the path to the playoffs for Baltimore is the division or nothing. I do not think there's a chance this team gets a wild card spot. They've lost too many tiebreakers to AFC opponents who are also competing for wild card spots, and I just don't think there's a realistic path there. So their path is out-dueling the Pittsburgh Steelers and out-dueling the Cincinnati Bengals the one more time they play. That is the Ravens' path. It is win the AFC North, you get the 4 seed, and you just try to go on a run, which the last 2 times that they've won the Super Bowl, they weren't the favorites. They weren't the 1 seed. They were the underdogs. They were the team that no one was talking about. They limped into the playoffs, and they end up going on a run. So that's what they need to do this season as well. And honestly, with the way Pittsburgh has played and that offense, and who knows what's going on with Aaron Rodgers and Mason Rudolph, this might be a hot take. I'm not sure how much of a hot take it is, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think Cincinnati might be a bigger threat than the Steelers are at this point, which is wild. Honest, and that is crazy for me to say if you've been listening to me on this show, because you know that the Bengals defense, I just go off on how poor it is every single week. They played better over the last, since their bye week, but even still, it's been historically bad. Zach Taylor, I don't think Zach Taylor is a good coach, but it just feels like the Steelers are spiraling right now, and the Bengals, they have momentum with Joe Burrow back, and the defense is playing better. The offensive line is playing good. It's crazy. So, all right, looking at the schedules for these teams. So, obviously for the Ravens, because I want to kind of dedicate this to the AFC North, this segment of the AFC North, because, we're talking about the Steelers losing and whatnot. Ravens right now, we know their schedule. They're playing the Steelers this week. Then they go on the road to play the Bengals. Then they come back home to play the Patriots. Then you end your season on the road 2 straight times, Packers and Steelers. So, you're going to have to beat some good teams here. And again, those Ravens and Steelers rivalry games, you never know what's going to happen. You could be the best team in the world, the worst team in the world, playing great football, playing terrible football. Everything's off the table when it comes to those Ravens and Steelers rivalries. I think that's a pretty well-known fact. But Pittsburgh's schedule, just diving into who they have to play over the next 5 weeks, they will play the Ravens, obviously. Then they will play the Dolphins at home, the Lions on the road, then the Browns and the Ravens again. So that Lions game is probably going to be tough for them, but outside, I'd probably chalk up Dolphins and Browns as wins, and then, Lions as a loss, and those Ravens games go however they go. So that's an interesting schedule, but the Ravens actually do need the Bills' help one more time, because next week the Bengals are playing the Bills. So that's the first game on the Bengals schedule, followed by that Ravens game the week after. Then the Bengals, to end their year, have Dolphins, Cardinals, and Browns, which realistically they could go 3-0 in that stretch. But honestly, the Bengals would have to probably win out to make the playoffs. And that includes beating the Ravens again at home, because they would have to secure that tiebreaker and not have it come down to division chance, because Baltimore still has those 3 division games left. So again, like, all the teams have hard games left on their schedule, but the Ravens probably have the most. Actually, I'm going to look real quick. Live research on Locked On Ravens. NFL strength of schedule, because we know that the Ravens are kind of done with that easy, quotes, easy part of their schedule. So for the remaining strength of schedule, we'll go to Tankathon for that. Baltimore currently has the 6th toughest strength of schedule remaining here, with a 575 win percentage. That's tied with Detroit. The teams who have a higher strength of schedule, meaning a tougher strength of schedule: Colts, Green Bay, Chargers, Seattle, and Chicago. So that's tough, and that goes off of winning percentage. So, you have a lot of teams, like obviously like Patriots and Packers. Steelers are 500, are playing them twice. Cincy's 4-8. It's not like they're, 2-10 or whatever. The Steelers and the Bengals, just for reference, the Steelers have the 23rd hardest schedule left, and the Bengals 27th. So Ravens are 6, Steelers are 23, Bengals are 27. Cleveland's 18th, but we're not counting Cleveland here. So, look, I am still confident that the Ravens are going to make the playoffs. And, the reason is because of how poor the AFC North is playing this year. And I'm just banking on the Bengals not going on a run, and the Steelers continuing to falter, and the Ravens doing just enough, despite their issues, to get in. And when I've been asked by multiple people, do you think that, I get asked, Kevin, do you think the Ravens are going to make the playoffs? And I say, I do. But the way they're playing right now, they're not going to go very far. And that's my prediction right now, based off how they're playing, is they're going to make it. They're going to somehow find a way to get in there, because the division is so bad. And then maybe it's a first round elimination. I don't know, because the wild card teams this year are going to be weird. Could be Buffalo, could be Chargers, could be Chiefs, could be Jaguar, like the Texans. There are a lot of teams that could be. So we're going to have to see them play against better teams over the last month of the season. They're going to need to show that they can do better there, especially, honestly, all sides of the ball, but offense, the big concern now for this team. Coming up, though, in the final part of the show, we'll get into some news and notes and a lot more here coming up on Locked On Ravens. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. The holiday season is one of the best times for sports, bowl games, big basketball matchups, playoff pushes. It's all happening at once. And while we're all making choices every day, one of the most fun places to make the right call is PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, lock in your lineup, and you're in the game. It's simple, fast, and available in 45 states, including California, Texas, Florida, in Georgia. Now, PrizePicks has added an extra layer of excitement to the holiday sports schedule. Creating a lineup takes less than a minute, and the app makes the whole process smooth and intuitive. You can choose from a huge range of unique stats. You got fantasy score, field goals, attempted, you got free throws made, turnovers, whatever fits your strategy. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Continuing on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still rocking out with you here on this Monday edition of the show. Ravens Steelers facing off at M&T Bank Stadium. The Ravens will wrap up their 3-game homestand this week before going on the road and playing 3 of their final 4 games away from Baltimore. So appreciate everybody again for being here. We have so much support on this show. It means the world to me, creeping up on 17,000 subscribers in video form and in audio form. We're growing each and every single day on there too. If you have a friend or a family member who wants some daily Ravens coverage, is a fan of the team, or just wants the Ravens perspective on something and wants to hear about it, wants to talk about it, be sure to send them over our way here on Locked On Ravens. And you can also follow me on social media at ChaosStriker34 on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, the whole 9 yards. All right, let's get into some news, notes, and quotes from this Ravens team. We're going to dive into a couple of things that the players had to say, the coaches had to say, and some other things that we talked about a little bit on our bonus episodes over the weekend, but I do want to dive into a little bit more detail on. Now, obviously, we do know that the Ravens made a change on the offensive line over the course of the game. That was moving Emory Jones into the lineup in a rotation role, so he didn't actually get the start. He and Voorhees were the ones that rotated, and he thought he did a decent job out there. The holding call he wanted to have back, he said, but he was really glad for his opportunity. We talked about this yesterday on our bonus episode for Sunday, where Ronnie Stanley said that he showed that he could play in the league, and I'm very curious to see what's going to happen there. And we talked about that yesterday, but I just genuinely don't know, because rotations, to me, I just don't like the rotations personally. If a guy's not playing well enough to play a full complement of snaps, don't play that guy. Get someone else in there that can. And I thought that Jones was pretty decent. Like, again, he wasn't like all the way great or all the way bad, but after the holding penalty and all that, like I thought he was solid overall. Some good plays, some bad plays, but I think showing you in one game more than Andrew Voorhees has at points this year. Not that, Voorhees, every game he's played has been bad, but it's just been consistently like, okay, here's one good game, and then here's like 3 bad ones. And I don't know. I think that while Emory Jones clearly is a rookie and hasn't played a lot, he's going to have to learn. I mean, they don't really have a lot of other options, which, is why when we were talking in the first part of the show about what Braden Fajoko had to say, like, I do agree with him in the fact that, like, the Ravens do need better offensive routes construction. And, part of that is investing in your offensive line, especially at that guard position, which they really haven't invested in since Marshall Yonder retired outside of Kevin Zeitler. So you really do need to figure that out. And I'm just curious to see if it is going to be Voorhees. Feels like they're very locked in with Daniel Falele. Again, I don't agree with that decision, but it's just very evident to me that Daniel Falele is a Harbaugh guy, and it's just going to stay that way. Again, Falele is far from the only issue on the offensive line. I think everybody understands that it's a whole group effort this season. Like, Falele's been bad, Voorhees has been bad, Rosengarten's regressed, Stanley's had pretty bad games at times, and I think that everybody's feeling it. Even Linderbaum, who I think is just being affected by everything right now, is tough. So yeah, it's a tough situation to be in, because they really don't have any other options outside of who they have on their roster. No one is walking through that door. And it's what I talked about on the bonus episode we did on Saturday, where, for the Ravens, well, actually I talked about it on both bonus episodes. I'm like, can the Ravens fix their issues? Yeah, some of them, but the one I'm most concerned about is that offensive line. Now, I am worried about Nate Wiggins too. I'm not sure. We haven't had any updates on Nate Wiggins outside of what John Harbaugh said, which is he could miss some time, but it's not a long-term thing. If he has to miss like the Steelers and the Bengals games, those are 2 really tough matchups to lose him for, especially that second Bengals game, where I'm not sure if T. Higgins will be back from his concussion at that point, but we'll see. And for Chandler Martin, John Harbaugh said that he did suffer a serious knee injury after the game, and that has been confirmed as a torn ACL. So his season is over. It's tough, because Chandler Martin was, after being called up a couple times, showing his value on special teams. They've already lost Jay Higgins for a little while here. So, losing Chandler Martin is a tough blow to the special teams unit. And I think, again, like, we've seen some tough moments from the special teams group this year on coverage and whatnot. But overall, I think they've been pretty solid there. And I mean, the 3, Loop, Stout, and Nick Moore, have been incredible all the way this season. Now, something that Ronnie Stanley did say, the other thing that Stanley said that I thought was very notable, and I dedicated an episode to it, or part of an episode to it, over the weekend, is, and I talked about it on both again because it was that important, is the fact that felt like Ronnie Stanley wanted the Ravens to run the ball more. And, he's not going to he's not actively complaining about it or anything like that. But he was asked about if there are instances where players can suggest ideas for offensive plays. And he said, there's a collaboration part and wanting to get back to the run, something that, the players encourage the coaches to do when we get back to the sideline, but we're still going to go out there and run whatever play is called. Again, I don't think he's complaining, but it was a very interesting comment to me because Derrick Henry was also asked about the opportunities that he, I guess, wasn't given over the course of the game. And he said that he's not one to complain to the media or anything like that. And, he's just going to go out there and do the, run the play that's called, kind of the same thing of what, Ronnie Stanley said. But it's interesting because of what we've talked about and what the whole consensus is across not just the Ravens fan base or the Ravens media or whatnot, but across the entire NFL world is what are you doing with this run game right now? Some of it's very predictable. And that's part of the problem is on some of these first downs, teams are stacking up to stop Derrick Henry because they know what's coming. And that predictability part, Todd Monken has had very predictable moments over the course of this season. He's also had incredible moments, but it's just far too inconsistent with what they have. And then defensively, the pass rush was not particularly great. In fact, it was not good at all in this Bengals game. The Bengals offensive line, again, has held up very well this season, all things considered. But your top pass rusher in this game, according to PFF, was Marlon Humphrey. Your worst pass rusher was actually Draymond Jones, according to PFF. And a lot of your outside linebackers are down at the bottom. A lot of your secondary was up towards the top on those blitzes. So, while the pass rush had improved over the last couple of weeks, we have seen that, and it's been a huge emphasis over the last month or so. Again, you're going to start playing some more teams here with better talent, and you're going to have to start stepping up there as well. So lots of things to discuss with this team this week. They need a big bounce back against the Steelers in week number 14. That's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. On the way out, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along and subscribe in audio form for 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Hit that notification bell or button or whatever you have so you can know when we put out our content and get that notification for it. So we'll be back here tomorrow talking more Ravens football. So be sure to stay tuned for all we have in store, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.